What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. Happy Tuesday, obviously. Didn't record yesterday, obviously. Wanted to give you guys and ourselves a little break for the holiday. But we're back. Ari, how was your holiday weekend? How you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Had a relaxing weekend. Lots of fun sports on. Yeah, everything's good.
Yeah, same here, man. Same here. So today, obviously, we're gonna do a little something different. We are gonna do a mailbag. You guys sent in many questions. Thanks. So also, thank you guys so much for sending all those questions. And so we're gonna be going one by one, just answering both questions. A little more of a discussion base today. For tomorrow, obviously, we're gonna be doing a lot more about NBA free agency. As we promised, a little more of a free agency tracker. As since last Thursday, we haven't recorded. Obviously there's been some movement still, and obviously we're still learning about some potential trades, especially a trade that happened literally Friday. We'll get into that in a little bit, but first we're getting into our first question here. The first question that was sent in, thanks to at trash.boat1. This is about the whole thing, everything with college football with USC, UCLA. His question is, their question, excuse me, is, do you think super conferences will ruin college football? Ari, I'm going to let you go second on this because I have a rant about this. I think super conferences are kind of like the nail in the coffin. I think NIL has started to ruin college football in a sense. I feel like the NIL has made it more of like a money grab thing for college football, or pretty much just college sports in general. I mean, you look at how college sports are now. You have the best talent going to the school with the most money, because they have the most to offer with all that NIL money and all those NIL deals. And so I think that was kind of the catalyst. And then as soon as these super conferences or this super conference discussion started to emerge, I feel like that was the nail in the coffin. And I feel like that is kind of like the reason I think college football is kind of dead now. I mean, especially for like a school like me, Wazoo, who was in the Pac-12, and now we're talking about being demoted to the Mountain West just because all the other schools have bigger media markets, and that's just not fair to a school like Wazoo, who is linked with uh, UW, and now there's been rumors about UW and Oregon potentially going to the Big Ten or the Big 12 as of this morning. So it just seems like USC and UCLA kind of screwed us over, and excuse my language, they really just fucked us over. I mean, when you really think about it, I mean, obviously for bigger schools like obviously like University of Arizona, who bigger market in Tucson, you guys will be fine. Probably, I've heard University of Arizona linked with the Big 12 as well, and that'll be pretty much a lot easier since you guys are right there in the South. But the thing for like a school like Wazoo or even Oregon State, because Oregon State's going to be in this as well. Like those small market schools, like we're kind of just in the middle. Like, okay, like what do we do? Because you have UCLA and USC going to the Big Ten, right? Those are already two schools, and then I've heard rumors 6 schools are going to the Big 12, and those schools are Arizona, ASU, I think Utah, Colorado, and I think Oregon and Washington as well. So you have those 6 schools. Okay, that's 8 out of the 12 Pac-12 teams that have gone somewhere. Okay, the last ones are Cal, Stanford, Wazoo, and Oregon State. And I've heard Cal and Stanford linked to the Big Ten and bigger conferences as well. So that just leaves these small schools like Wazoo and OSU in a position where, okay, well, what are you gonna do? I mean, what can you do? There's nothing. There's nothing that we can do just because of how small the market is. So I think super conferences are ruining college football, but at the same time, it's already been ruined with NIL, and it's a shame because if you ask someone like literally like 10 years ago about the state of college football, you would think, oh yeah, college football is fun. It's amazing. You have like the best conferences, all that stuff in different regions of the country. You have the Pac-12, Big 12, SEC, ACC, all that Pac-12, all that stuff. And I think the problem started with the college football playoff. And I feel like the college football playoff was kind of the beginning of everything. And I believe that because if it wasn't for the college football playoff, there would not have been any realignment as well. No, there have not been any like major realignment like this. Like obviously you have smaller schools like UCF making their jump to the Power Five, and that's cool and all, and that's something like that's a great story, moving up in the world. But I feel like NIL has now caused these schools like Oklahoma, Texas, UCLA, with all the big money to go to better conferences so then they can attract better talent, give them more money, and compete with the best of the best in the country. And I feel like this super conference is just making it seem like, okay, well, there's only really three good conferences in college football. There's the Big Ten. Okay, yes, they have Ohio State, Michigan. Okay, let's look at the SEC. Okay, they have Alabama, Georgia, Florida. We know the SEC. And I've heard the ACC may do something as well because we haven't even heard anything about the ACC. The only thing I've really heard is that potentially a few teams could join the Big Ten in that super conference. I don't know, but I think that's kind of died down now. And I feel like the ACC is going to survive on its own. And maybe we'll see what happens with the ACC after that. But it's just a shame to see how much money has factored into college football now. When you think about it, like 10 years ago, how pretty much not little, but it wasn't the forefront of college football. It was just kind of like, deals with, TVs and media markets. And no, there was no such thing as NIL because college athletes couldn't profit off of it. And so at the end of the day, I feel like they've taken the student athlete out of the student athlete. They took the student out and just kind of made them like professional athletes. The NCAA is not a college run. It's not the National Collegiate Athletic Association. It's just the National Athletic Association in correlation to colleges. So it's just a shame, but yeah, the college football is pretty much ruined at this point.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the same boat as you. I'm kind of more of a traditionalist in that, like, the Power Five conferences. I mean, I think whether what's going to happen now, which it won't happen, I think, till 2024 is when UCLA and USC are going to join the Big Ten. But I mean, I think it was Gilbert. Yes, let's go. Okay. I think it was inevitable that this is going to happen at some point, whether it was going to come about now or, say 4 or 5 years from now. I mean, we talked about last episode about the alliance of the three conferences potentially merging. So, I mean, I think it was inevitable at some point that something like this is going to happen. But yeah, I agree that it's not fair. I think it's Stanford, Wazoo, Oregon State, and Cal are the 4 teams kind of not in the conversation to join the Big 12, Big 10, and I put down Mountain West as well as a likelihood that where they might land. And yeah, I mean, I think, and then you have the rivalries of like UW and Wazoo that's going to kind of like, how's that going to go about now, not being in the same conference, and so you just have like this kind of tradition that's gone on for 50, 100 years now that's going to kind of be ruined. I mean, maybe they'll still have the Apple Cup even though they're on the same conference. I'm not sure I'm not sure if that will be affected by the conference, but I mean, yeah, I agree. I mean, and you have always had like the Pac-12 after dark, kind of those fun games. So a lot's going to change, and obviously it's all about money at the end of the day. I agree. It's not about the student athletes anymore. It's all about money, which kind of always been like that to an extent, but now it's going to be like that to an even bigger extent. I feel like now pushing all of these potentially Big 12 turned to a Big 18 with like 18 teams in the conference, which I think it's not like too crowded of a conference, but I mean, we've heard rumors of like these bigger conferences merging away from the NCAA and kind of creating their own type of league, like we're seeing with, I don't follow golf, but I think it's like the Live is moving away from PGA and they're taking some of the PGA players. So I feel like it might end up being something like that, where it's like you have the NCAA and then you have like a different type of whatever you want to call it, like a few conferences merging away from the NCAA. So we'll see if that kind of happens or not. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you that it's not. I don't think it's good for college football. I think it gives the sport. It's more about money again, which is obviously all they care about. But as like a fan or a college sports fan, I don't really like the way it's going. But again, I think it was inevitable that it was going to happen. So
yeah, and you also mentioned like Wazoo and UW, like the Apple Cup, and then the Civil War in OSU and Oregon, and not even just that, like the fact that those games will exist. Like this goes so deep. I mean, for like Wazoo and Oregon, like say they go to the Mountain West, the recruiting battle in state is going to be so one-sided every time because you have Oregon and UW potentially going into either the Big 12 or the Big 10. And then what? You have Wazoo and Oregon State going into the Mountain West. Like, that just, like, why would you even have, like, an Apple Cup at that point? Because it'd just be UW dominating every season. Unless somehow, some way, like Wazoo or even in the Civil War in Oregon State could potentially, make it competitive in the state or just recruiting battle generally. It just isn't, like, it's just ruining everything. And it's just going to get worse and worse. And it like you mentioned, I'm a traditionalist as well. I like to see like back in like 2000 like 14, like the first year of like the college football playoff. That was fun because it was brand new and people were still learning, and like we had so many different teams up in that conversation. We had like Mississippi, like TCU was in there at some point, like Mississippi State was in there at some point. All these teams have always been in there, and I just feel like I just feel like this is just ruining the sport, and it's just a shame because I love college football, and I know you love college football, and I know a lot of people who I know, they know I love college football, and to see it just, excuse my language, pretty much just see it go to shit like this just because of money. I mean, yeah, it was, we knew it was going to happen, but it's still just horrible to see. So yeah, shame to see out of college football. We're getting into our next question here. Trying to move on from college football. This is coming from at X King Raven X. Thanks for the question. They're asking who's going to take the bigger leap this year out of the rookie year quarterbacks between Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. I'm going to let you lead on this one. Who do you think is going to take the bigger leap this year? Not even just in terms of fantasy, but just in terms of like actual playing field between these two quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Lawrence, and it's mostly like a combination of like talent and also just the moves each team made this offseason. I mean, you look at the Bears this offseason, they brought in Byron Pringle and Velus Jones Jr., the rookie, as like the two kind of biggest, offensive weapon moves. And then with the Jaguars, I mean, it's not like that much better in terms of like talent, but you just look at Sam Haggerty home run, yay, 1-0. You look at the Jags. They're going to get Travis Etienne fully healthy, who they didn't have at all last year. You brought in Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram. You bring in Brandon Sheriff to upgrade the offensive line. So it's just a lot more to be moves that the Jaguars made this offseason. They both had what you hope to be coach upgrades for both of them, with Doug Peterson in Jacksonville and Matt Eberflus in Chicago. So hopefully the coaching changes will benefit both of them in that regard. But you just look at the changes that both teams made this offseason offensively and on the offensive line. And then mixed with just Trevor Lawrence's, people were calling him a generational talent. Obviously last year was not the best, but his situation was also pretty bad. And we still saw flashes of him. Like we saw when they beat the Colts in the final week, we saw Lawrence make some huge plays. I think he had the one touchdown to Marvin Jones, I think it was, where he like ran back like 10 yards and then like threw off the back of his foot to Marvin Jones. So, I mean, even though it wasn't the best rookie year for Lawrence, we still saw flashes, and we saw flashes from Justin Fields as well, especially as a rusher. And I think we'll still see. I think Fields will take a step forward as well this year. I think mixed with the talent and the upgrades this offseason, I think Lawrence makes the bigger jump of the two.
Yeah, I was pretty much going to say the same exact thing. I agree with you. Trevor Lawrence, I think, is going to make this bigger leap this year. And I pretty much just credit it due to the fact that Chicago really has not provided not really provided any significant talent around Justin Fields. That was kind of the one thing that people were claiming for out of Chicago was, okay, now you have to provide Justin Fields some help. And you mentioned the two really big acquisitions for the Bears, and I mean, that's okay, but it's not really anything key noteworthy. I mean, you mentioned all the Jags. I mean, they brought in Christian Kirk on that very large contract. They brought in Evan Ingram. They brought in so many people to kind of go around Trevor Lawrence, and not to mention and you mentioned that his situation, I think, was a little bit worse than Justin Fields last year just because of Urban Meyer, and the offensive line was horrible, and the defense wasn't up to par as well, and no one really had any expectations for this for that Jacksonville Jaguars team just because of how poorly, literally, the whole organization was around them. And then you bring in the fact that Justin Fields, okay, well, he had a little bit, so he has a good running back out the backfield. The defense is not as bad; it's still very functional, but they haven't added on, and that's the problem. And I definitely agree with you in that Chicago in that for Chicago. I feel like unless Darnell Mooney becomes the wide receiver one that Chicago Bears fans see sometimes, I don't really see any uh, huge leap for Justin Fields in terms of just his play, just because of how they've really poorly surrounded his offense. So I definitely agree with that. Trevor Lawrence is definitely going to be the is definitely going to have a bigger leap this year. And you mentioned last year's Week 18 game against the Colts. Pretty much storybook ending. The Colts missing the playoffs because they lose to the 3-14 Jags or whatever they were at the time. Like whatever the record was, they lost to them on the road, and that was a game like they had in the bag. So I feel like I definitely agree with you there. I feel like just Trevor Lawrence. I feel like he has more potential just because of the new coaching staff that's in there. A new regime, a new organization, a new year, new faces, new offensive line. A lot more upside with Trevor Lawrence this year. So I definitely agree with you there. And now we're going to move on, unless Ari, you have anything else to talk about. We're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next question. This is actually kind of an interesting one. This is a mock trade proposal. This comes into us from @trap.0r. They gave us a proposal. This is for a dynasty league. For everyone just watching right now, this is for a dynasty league. So the mock trade is one guy has Garrett Wilson, Aaron Jones, and he's offering as well a late 2023 first round pick, all for Jamar Chase. Ari, I want to get your thoughts on this first. What do you think of this trade? Do you think it's fair? Do you think it's wheeling one way or the other? Especially for a dynasty league like this, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off by saying that, like, a lot of times for these trades, like, your roster and your situation matters. So I'm just going off the trade without knowing the roster, obviously. I'm going to assume it's a one quarterback league and not super flex because that makes a big difference with the rookie pick as well. So, I mean, as great as Chase is, as fun as he is, to roster and all of that, I do lean towards the other side. I just think that with the super strong potential 2023 draft class coming in, paired with, Aaron Jones is still right in his prime, and then you have Garrett Wilson during his rookie year. I think that just the overall value of that side outweighs Jamar Chase. I mean, I think there's situations where I might favor the Chase side, like if you're deep at running back and you had another 2023 first round pick, then like in that situation, I might lean towards the Chase side. But, based on what I know and based on what we know about the situation, I lean towards the Garrett Wilson side just from the overall value of that side. But yeah, I mean, there are situations where, like, if you're deep at running back and you have another pick in the 2023 first round, then I might consider Chase at that point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I feel like this is kind of more situational because you don't know the whole team. You only get to see a few players from each side. You don't get a full aspect of who's on what roster. But just looking at this front face value right now, I definitely gonna have to agree with you. You mentioned that 2023 draft class is going to be very stacked. Pretty much pretty much every single position. It's going to be one of the deeper draft classes. And then you mentioned a young Garrett Wilson in his first year rookie season, and he could potentially be a star out of New York, depending on the whole Zach Wilson situation, see how he can make that leap from year one to year two as well. So I definitely agree that I would lean toward that haul that the other person would be getting, Garrett Wilson. And you mentioned Aaron Jones as well. He's still a great running back out of Green Bay. He still puts up very great RB2 numbers with definitely RB1 upside. And then you mentioned that this draft class next year is very deep. And yes, Jamar Chase is that dog. He is that guy. But it's a crowded offense, and there's other guys like T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd that we're forgetting, and there's other stars on that team where they could have a shine out week, and Jamar Chase can have a little bit of a not a dead week, but just not as what people expect for him. And but it all depends on rosters. Like as you mentioned, you don't know how deep the roster is for the guy who is getting chased. Maybe that has um, running backs and wide receivers to offload. Maybe trying to make a big splash to compete. You never know, and vice versa. Maybe for the guy who's average, trying to get that haul. Maybe they're in a position where they just want to get rid of Chase for some draft picks and some value. You never know, but face value, I gotta agree with you. I'm gonna go with getting that haul for Garrett Wilson, Aaron Jones, and that 2023 late first round pick. I feel like that is kind of the lean just because, of all that upside, and especially in a dynasty league where you already have a rookie and a next year rookie coming in, especially now where you want, and then that receiver core can be really, really good for you for the long term. So it pretty much is all situational, but I definitely agree with Ari there. So we're getting into our next question here. This one comes from at the J Bowl. This is a pretty interesting question. He asked, can the Cardinals win a Super Bowl with Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury? I'll go first this time, Ari. I'm going to say no. And I'm a firmly say no. And I say no because I think it's one of those two. And when I say one of those two, you got to get rid of one of those two. I feel like that Kyler Murray Cliff Kingsbury connection does not work. It has tried, but it does not work. You surround Kyler Murray with all that talent. DeAndre Hopkins they trade for. They have now James Conner in the backfield. They bring in Marquise Goodwin because DeAndre Hopkins is suspended. They draft Rondale Moore. They had a great defense last year. You had J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones, pretty much one of the best two defensive end combos I've ever seen for the NFL. You have Budda Baker deep in that secondary. You have Isaiah Simmons who can play any position, and you still can't make it out of the first round. I just can't believe that there should even be Super Bowl conversation with this Arizona Cardinals football team right now. Just seeing how they play, it's not like it's anything bad, right? I'm not hating on the Arizona Cardinals as a Seahawks fan. I'm just saying that this connection does not work. I feel like a lot of people have been saying it's Cliff Kingsbury, but we saw how horribly Kyler Murray played in that wild card game against the Rams on the road, where he just did not look comfortable at all. So it's just one or the other, and I feel like Cliff Kingsbury is definitely more on the hot seat this season because of his inability to really advance throughout the playoffs while having that roster that he has. So short answer, no. But I feel like if it's one star, like maybe like a star on that, or maybe some more offensive line help because Kyler Murray is always running for his damn life in that pocket. So maybe offensive line help, maybe that's what it is. Or maybe one more star on that defense to replace Chandler Jones, maybe that's what that is. Or maybe getting rid of Cliff Kingsbury and bringing a veteran head coach who can actually lead this team. Maybe that's what it is. I feel like there's just something missing. There's one thing missing with this Arizona Cardinals team that's making them a legitimate Super Bowl contender. They're definitely playoff contenders. I will definitely say that. That's for sure. Oh, and I guess Ari left. I guess Ari is having some more trouble. 1 second here. So Ari comes back.
Only one more month in the Steve department, so only one more.
But I was just pretty much wrapping up saying, yeah, I feel like they're one star away from, or maybe it's a coaching change or just one thing away from being true contenders.
Yeah, I found this interesting stat. So we talked about like before about how they were the best team in the league the first half of last year, and then they had the collapse late that led to the blowout loss against the Rams. And if you go back to 2013, which is the first year Kingsbury was the head coach of Texas Tech, the stat was from game 8 on, since 2013 on. He's 17-45 from week. So for the second half of the season, compared to a 42-20-1 record from games 1 to 7. So this isn't just a 1 or 2 year sample size. This is like 8 year sample size, basically. of constant collapses in the second half of the season from college to the NFL. And so that's why I think it's more of a coaching issue with Arizona. But I also think that I agree that Kyler is to blame to an extent as well. I mean, we saw last year when Hopkins was hurt, his play, his efficiency, just everything dropped significantly. And so I think when like a quarterback that needs a star receiver, like you have to step up no matter situation if you're an elite quarterback. And so while Murray is a great fantasy quarterback from a real life standpoint, leading your team to a Super Bowl, I'm not sure Murray is that guy. But I think we talked about it when they lost to the Rams in the playoffs last year that this year is going to be a huge prove it year for both Kyler and Kingsbury. And so they're definitely going to have a lot of pressure on them. I mean, the NFC is pretty much wide open for the most part. And so this is their year if they're going to make a run to do it. With Hopkins being suspended the first 6 games, that's going to play a role, obviously, in how they do the first half. So maybe having Hopkins fully healthy the second half of the year will help them be better in the second half. But a receiver of his age could also hurt him, missing that much time. And so, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, and I feel like this is definitely the Cliff Kingsbury hot seat season. I feel like if he does not prove anything, I feel like he definitely is going to go. And you mentioned his track record at Texas Tech, and you mentioned just pretty much the past 3 seasons, Connor. We saw last season, right? Best record in the league, 8-0, and then they fall apart, finish 11-5, and lose in the first round. And then they do it again the season before. They start out with, what was it, like 6-2? Then they finish 8-8. So this is a track record with Kingsbury, and I feel like if he does not do it this season, I feel like he's gone, and that's why I just don't feel like this Arizona team should be anywhere near Super Bowl admirations. And yeah, like I said right there, Murray definitely a fantasy quarterback. He definitely can run. He has his ability to scramble. Really puts up some yards right there. He has that deep ball ability. He says someone's down there, and someone usually receives it. Sometimes DeAndre Hopkins, we'll see. But in terms of real life, there's been questions, but it's definitely right now more on Cliff Kingsbury than Kyler Murray, who's on the hot seat. And I feel like and especially remember, we had these frustrations that Kyler Murray was, just frustrated with the team this offseason. So it kind of shows you that there's something going on in that front office that, Cliff Kingsbury is definitely on the hot seat this season. And I feel like this could be his last season. So the next question we're going to get into, this is coming from, again, X King Raven X. This is a little more of NBA now. We're going to just slight transition to the NBA. Just rookie of the year predictions. I'm going to go first again. Honestly, I came down to 3 guys for me. One of them is kind of an outlying pretty much a way outlier, and I think 2 are pretty much kind of the favorites. So my 2 favorites are kind of Jaden Ivey right now. A lot of people have been saying Jaden Ivey just because, he's linking up with Cade Cunningham, and Detroit is now kind of now on the uprise. That young core that they built in Detroit, Sadiq Bey. They bring in, obviously, Isaiah Stewart. They bring in Jalen Durant, big body center out of Memphis. They obviously had Cade Cunningham from last year's draft, and now they bring in the elite shooter, Jaden Ivey. I feel like Jaden Ivey, and the way he's just presenting himself, he's very confident. I feel like that energy could transition on the court, and so I feel like Jaden Ivey could definitely be up there. Obviously, Banchero, number 1 overall pick. I would love to see him potentially win it. That'd be a great story for Seattle. Number 1 overall pick. And then going to Orlando, has a great first season, potentially becomes rookie of the year. That'd be a great story for him. And so I feel like he's definitely going to be up there. But my kind of outlying favorite that I don't really see many people talking about, but, it could be happening, I think a deep sleeper is Shaedon Sharpe out of going to the Blazers. I feel like, since a lot of people, no one has seen him since high school, no one really knows what he's really bringing to the game, or, no one really knows what he's doing now since no one got to see him at Kentucky play. I feel like, that could be something huge. I feel like, since the league hasn't really seen him play since high school, that could definitely be kind of an advantage, potentially have a big season out of Portland, or depending on where he ends up with this whole KD situation. We'll get into that a little bit. But definitely I would say those 3 kind of I would lean toward Jaden Ivey and Paolo Banchero just because, heavy favorites, better situations. But Shaedon Sharpe, I mean, depending on, how he comes into summer league and then heading into the season, if he's shooting the ball well like he was in high school, I feel like this definitely could be a season where he could definitely win Rookie of the Year, kind of be that breakout star for the Blazers, who they're kind of looking for to complement Dame. So I feel like those kind of three names could potentially be Rookie of the Year this year.
Yeah, I like the Sharp call as a kind of dark horse. It'll be interesting to see where he fits with Lillard healthy, and then they just gave Anthony Simons the huge extension. So, but I guess they could play the 1-2-3 potentially. I also have Jaden Ivey. I think that obviously Banchero's he's a very high likelihood just being the number 1 overall pick, but just kind of going a little bit different than the number 1 overall pick. I think that this offense in Detroit is going to be really, it's going to be a lot of Cade and Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey is drawn in comparison to John Morant with his play style, the explosion. I think Ivey needs. I think if he's going to be the Rookie of the Year, his shooting from the outside needs to take a little bit of a step forward, which we can likely see, as he develops. But yeah, I think Ivey's the most exciting player in this draft, in my opinion, just from a pure, watching them standpoint and with his explosion. And another player I had in mind potentially was Keegan Murray. Obviously, it's only summer league, but we saw it. I mean, it's better to be good than not good in the summer league. And we saw him drop 28 in his first game, 10 of 14. And, he should play a big role, in Sacramento. So he's another player I kind of had in mind. But Jaden Ivey in Detroit was my prediction for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, those are that's a pretty good name right there, Jaden Ivey as well. But I like Keegan Murray as well. You mentioned his early stats in the California. It's super early, obviously, just his first couple games, as a Sacramento King, but definitely still something noteworthy, dropping 28 and 14 in the California Classic. And I saw this video, Kings fans already talking about they're going to get 40 wins, and I was like, oh boy. So I guess the Keegan Murray hype train is there. So yeah, that could potentially be a huge dark horse as well. I like that pick as well, Ari. Next question we're going to get into. This is coming from, again, at X King Raven X. A lot of questions from X King Raven X today. This is baseball related now. So now this is going to be the favorites to win the World Series other than the Yankees and the Dodgers. All right, I'm going to let you go first on this one. Out of those two teams, I actually see a few, but who do you think is a kind of a favorite right now to win out of the Yankees and the Dodgers?
Oh, no, the question was other than them. Like, those are the two
Yeah,
kind of
I meant
obvious.
outside.
Yeah.
Sorry, I meant outside of that.
So I hate to say this, but the Astros is who I had as the favorite other than those two. I mean, they're the number 2 team overall in MLB, only behind the Yankees right now. You have Yordan Alvarez. Yeah.
Oh my God.
You have Alvarez, who's arguably like a top 3 to 5 hitter in the league right now, hitting 310, 24 home runs. You have the second best rookie in the American League in Jeremy Pena, hitting 278, 11 home runs. And obviously you have the other staples, Altuve, Bregman, Brantley. Their lineup still hasn't lost a step. And then the rotation, they have Verlander, Framber Valdez, and Christian Javier, who all have an ERA in the 2s. And Luis Garcia has an ERA like 3.54, I believe, as their number 4 or 5 starter. And then you got Urquidy, who has been a little bit inconsistent, but he's number 3 in the rotation in quality starts. So when he's good, he's been really good. And when he's been bad, he's been pretty bad. Then you got Presley leading the way out of the bullpen, Rafael Montero. And I think the Astros will make a move or two at the trade deadline, potentially in the bullpen or at the end of the starting rotation. So they're not done, I don't think, making moves. And so, yeah, the Astros are who I had, other than the Yankees and Dodgers being a likelihood to make the World Series and win the World Series.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate one right there. I have to agree with you, but I'm going to put a different one in there. I'm going to put one out of the NL East. I'm going to go with the Mets. And I feel like, obviously, they're kind of up there as well. I feel like the Mets definitely are definitely having a great season right now, just in terms of the pitching roster. I mean, they're going to get a healthy DeGrom soon. Scherzer's already coming back. They're still in contention for first place right now. I think they are still in first place in the NL East right now. The lineup is hitting okay, but I feel like, they could definitely be hitting their stride a lot later into the season. And I feel like the Mets could definitely be a dark horse if that rotation gets healthy and that roster, that 1-9 starts hitting the ball well. The Mets are definitely going to be World Series contenders by now. I mean, you mentioned Scherzer, DeGrom, Taiwan Walker's having a good season. I know Carrasco's having a pretty good season. They still have Bassett. They still have McGill, who out of Arizona, great season for him. So they have one of the best starting rotations. And the way Edwin Diaz, his inconsistencies are proven to be a little scary, but I feel like once he gets that locked down, I feel like he definitely could be. And as Mariner fans, we've seen him be that elite closer. So if he becomes that guy again, I feel like the Mets could definitely have a World Series roster built for this year. And the way they made these moves is looking like look, right now they're right there. They are in contention. I feel like we could potentially have a Subway Series for the World Series. I mean, the way the Mets are playing right now, just great baseball, and the Yankees obviously the best team in baseball right now. So I definitely agree with you. I definitely would say the Astros as well, but for my sanity and don't want to be saying the Astros, I'm going to go with the New York Mets. Just that rotation 1-5 is one of the best in baseball, and that offense is okay. But I feel like once they get their stride, Pete Alonso, obviously you can rake. Francisco Lindor, hitting I think he has a 2.6 WAR, so very very great good season for Lindor as well. And the rest of that offense, if they get healthy and they get their stride back, I feel like the Mets are going to be up there as contenders as well. And
yeah, I mean, if Scherzer's coming back today and hopefully DeGrom in the next month, so if those two are healthy, that's by far the best 1-2 punch in the starting rotation. I saw DeGrom struck out 5 in a single A rehab assignment. Imagine him being like 18 in single A, going up against 100 from DeGrom.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And you mentioned, Scherzer comes back today, his first start, and then DeGrom is about a month away, and that's pretty much prime time to just start making that playoff push. So definitely the Mets as well as the Astros. So now we're gonna get into our next question here. This next question comes in as well from at Mike underscore Patafi. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, but I'm gonna let Ari kind of dominate this question as I'm not the tennis aficionado as he is. Ari, I'm just gonna ask you a simple: who do you have winning Wimbledon this year?
You can hear me, Rick. I just cut out for a second.
Oh yeah, you're perfect. You're perfect over here.
Okay, so we saw the first 2 quarterfinal matchups today. Novak Djokovic faced Sinner, and Sinner went up 2-0. And then Djokovic battled his way back and won 3 straight sets to hold on and beat Sinner. And then we saw Norrie and Goffin, and Norrie won in 5 sets as well. So both won 5 sets today. And so it'll be Djokovic against Norrie in the semifinals in that part of the draw. And then tomorrow we have the other 2 quarterfinals. One between Guerin and Nick Kyrgios, and then the other between Tommy Fritz, the American, and Rafael Nadal. I'm gonna be biased here. I've been a Nadal fan my whole life, so I'm gonna stick with him. He's yet to lose a major match this year. He won the Australian Open earlier in the year, and he's still looked as dominant as he has all year so far in Wimbledon. But it should be a pretty good match between Fritz and Nadal. Fritz, I think he's the first American to make the quarterfinals in quite some time. So, and there's American woman in the quarters and the women's draw as well. And so it's good to see the Americans, not named, Serena Williams, making their way, through the draw. But I think it's going to be Kyrgios, Nadal in the semis in that part, and then I think we're going to see a clash between Nadal and Djokovic in the finals. And Djokovic, he's one of arguably the best player in the world on the grass in Wimbledon. But I think Nadal has the momentum, and he's dominated in pretty much every match he's played in, especially in the majors this year. And so I'm going to go Nadal over Djokovic in the championship of the men's Wimbledon this year.
All right, you heard it first from the not only fantasy.football expert, but the Wimbledon tennis expert right there. We're going to get into our next question here. This comes in from at Maxinstagram. Hoping I'm pronouncing that right. This is NBA. This has pretty much been like one of the bigger stories at the NBA pretty much in the past couple weeks. The whole Kevin Durant saga, and she's pretty much there asking where we see Kevin Durant pretty much landing. I'll go first this time. This one, I feel like there's three teams that I could see him going to. I could see him going out west to Phoenix, going down to Miami, or going up to Toronto. And I feel like those are the three teams that have been in the media as of recently. And I feel like with Phoenix, I feel like Phoenix has the power. But I remember this morning, Woj reported that they're asking for a lot. They're asking for several first rounds and an all-star. And obviously, they just locked up, and there's a list of players that cannot be traded to the Nets for KD due to the rookie contract extensions. And there are a lot of names. I saw Devin Booker's name in there. I think I saw Bam Adebayo's name. I saw plenty of names in there that kind of listed off pretty much star players that the Nets were kind of targeting to acquire in trades. And I feel like, I kind of limit who they can really trade with now. So, I mean, you really look at it, I feel like in terms of just what they can provide, I feel like Miami has kind of the better route just because of all they have. I mean, they have Duncan Robinson, they have Tyler Hero, Vincent Strus. They have so many players that they can send up to Brooklyn for Kevin Durant. I just feel like right now I would love to see him on Phoenix, but I see him landing in Miami or potentially I don't know what Toronto would probably be offering. I think I heard Anunoby along with I think Precious. No, not Precious. I think it was Trent. I saw a bunch of mock trades.
So you're saying they can't trade Scotty Barnes? Is that what you meant by the rookie?
No, basically they can't sign. There's a rule in the NBA. They can't sign and trade, or they can't trade for someone who is on a rookie year contract extension right now because they already did that with Ben Simmons.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so they can't have two on the same team. So that's why like Devin Booker, who just signed his rookie year contract extension, he can't go because they already have Ben Simmons, who literally just did that, and there's a rule in the NBA saying that they can't have two on the same team. So they already limits pretty much most of the trade outlets that they want to target. But that's why I said Miami. They have all those young guys like Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Strus, and all those guys. But it'll be interesting to see what Toronto's offering. I've heard Anunoby in there. I've heard I think a couple first round picks, but the asking price for the Nets is very, very steep. So I feel like it'll kind of be a clash of kind of who want what to give more, who's going to give more out of the Nets giving in, or all these other teams trying to trade for Kevin Durant. And then also, I saw this weird conspiracy theory. I don't know if it's true, but maybe KD and Kyrie stay in Brooklyn, right? I mean, maybe because they hate the media. KD is pretty much. I mean, if you want to talk about two players in the NBA that hate the media, you look to KD and Kyrie. And I feel like KD and Kyrie can pretty much just kind of be doing this on their own, kind of just roll up the media, kind of, saying like, oh, well, let's see what they do. But ending up, because right now, I mean, look, it looks like they're kind of have to be stuck there. Obviously, Kyrie is a little more flexible just because Kyrie right now, I feel like Kyrie, has a little more leeway. Because he's been pretty much looking toward LA forever. But KD, maybe he stays. But for now, I definitely see him going to Miami. Ari?
Yeah, so do you know if Ayton falls under that player that they can't trade for? Do you know?
No, Ayton doesn't because he did not sign the contract extension.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I saw the same report from Woj, the All-Star, several first-round picks, which I feel like is a little bit too far-fetched. I think realistically, especially with Durant kind of having I feel like the Nets don't have much leverage here, I feel like. Although, I mean, they do in that they have the right to trade them, but they don't want to have Durant holding out or whatever, if this is true. But like you said, with maybe they both stay, with the way Kyrie is, it wouldn't shock me if that was to be the case. But if we're just going to speculate here that he is going to be traded, I mean, I think the Suns, the best package potentially. I mean, the Nets said that they didn't have any interest in DeAndre Ayton, which I don't really get personally. I mean, I feel like Aiton Bridges and like 2 first-round picks or whatever, something like that would be like the best that they're going to get for him. And then you mentioned the Heat would potentially like Hero, Duncan Robinson, and some first-round picks. And Toronto has some young guys, but I mean, I feel like the Suns have the most realistic package compared with the best that Brooklyn's going to get for Durant. So I'm going to say the Suns if Durant is traded, but I mean, with there being limited kind of interest realistically for Durant based on what they're asking, and then with Kyrie, it's like really the Lakers seem like or no one else. So I mean, maybe they do both stay in Brooklyn at this point, but I mean, I thought we might see a announcement yesterday with Durant because when he signed with the Warriors it was on July 4th as well. So I thought we might see something yesterday, but it's kind of been a little bit quiet as of late in terms of both Kyrie and Durant and where they might go. And I think this might draw out for a while into the offseason. And at some point, maybe, if it gets into like training camp or whatever, maybe they just end up staying in Brooklyn at that point.
Yeah, honestly. And you mentioned KD yesterday. People were expecting to see some kind of alert from him, but obviously no. But you mentioned the Warriors, and there was reports coming out of this weekend that the Warriors were also interested in Kevin Durant, and I said no, shut that down immediately. As a Warriors fan, I don't want him. We don't need him. We work so hard, and the names that were being brought up to trade away were, I think, Jordan Poole, Wiseman, I believe Andrew Wiggins, and one more.
Kuminga.
Yeah, and Kuminga. And I said, no, we're not trading away what we worked so hard for just for a man to be the second best shooter on our team. That's not going to work. So, and I think the Warriors kind of knew that. They did not want to give up so much for what they've worked for, and they don't need him. We don't need him. So I think the Warriors are kind of out of that KD market as well. But I mean, right now, you really never know. It looks like Kyrie is kind of locked in on the Lakers or staying in Brooklyn, and then Kevin Durant is kind of up in the air. So we may see them stay in Brooklyn, but you never know. This could be dragged out for the offseason, but then again, it could be an hour from now and be like breaking Kevin Durant traded to the Suns or something like that. So we'll see what happens for Kevin Durant. But we're getting into our next question here. This question is coming from @JamesDuranda. Thanks for this question. So this is a fantasy football question now. He's asking, who are we taking number 2 overall? He said that after Jonathan Taylor goes number 1 in a PPR league. Ari, I'm going to let you go first on this one. Who are you taking? If you have the number 2 pick and Jonathan Taylor's gone in a PPR, who you lean towards?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of some people, it's clear here. Some people have kind of speculation between a few different players. For me, it's Christian McCaffrey. I know a lot of people will have hesitancy drafting him this high based off his injuries the past couple of seasons. But for me, it just comes down to me willing to take the risk on this pure upside. When he's been on the field the past couple of seasons, he hasn't lost a step, and the injuries he suffered the past couple of seasons aren't torn ACL or kind of injuries that worry me, kind of long term in that extent. So I'm willing to take the risk on McCaffrey number 2 based on the upside. I think he can easily be number 1 overall, if he stays healthy. And I'm kind of going back and forth myself, even number 1 between him and Jonathan Taylor and PPR just based off pure upside. But I understand wanting to go a safer route with another player. It just kind of depends on how kind of risk averse you are as a fantasy manager. And so just for me personally, based on what we've seen from McCaffrey when he's been healthy, mixed with the injuries that he's had, I'm still taking McCaffrey number 2 overall and potentially number 1 overall come August, September.
Yeah, I feel like McCaffrey's name is definitely up there as well in terms of PPR, but obviously the biggest thing is health scare after last season, so there is some hesitancy, and I agree with you there. I would kind of just agree with you in general. I definitely think CMC is kind of number 2 right there right now, just because on the field, we've seen something that we've never seen anything. He puts up numbers when he's on the field. He is kind of that utility player on offense. He receives the ball out of the backfield. He can run the ball well. He's pretty much just what you're looking for when you're looking for a fantasy running back who can do it all. And when he's on the field, he is a top talent. And obviously, he's still in the top 5 for now in terms of just fantasy perspective for a reason, because even though he got injured, he's still one of the best fantasy talents right now. And I definitely agree with you. Yes, there is some hesitation with his injury status, but I feel like, in the situation where he is right now in Carolina, where he kind of has to be the offense, or else it's going to go through DJ Moore, and we saw how that offense flourished through the rest of the season in Carolina. Ari, I'm a little behind here, so I'll celebrate in 20 seconds. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. Definitely, Christian McCaffrey is kind of the kind of locked second point, number 2 overall pick for me in the PPR. But you can argue anyone else. Let's go. You can argue anyone else. You can argue Cooper Kupp, obviously, after his amazing triple count season. You can argue Jamar Chase, with his connection with Joe Burrow. You can argue pretty much any one of those guys, but for now, I definitely would safely say Christian McCaffrey is a safe number 2 option in the PPR league. And we're going to get into our next question here. This was kind of a fun one. This comes in from Matt Hawley Readings on Instagram. Thanks for this question. They asking, how often do you switch your fantasy team name? I'll go first for this one. So obviously, our main league, we can't really switch our team names just because of the history, and that's okay. But for me, it kind of depends on who's on my team, because I kind of like to do like a little name play, just like, or, kind of a little, I like to get a little dark. I'm not going to lie with my team names, a little funny inside joke that obviously sports fans would know. Like, I don't know if this is going to be getting a lot of hate or not, but one of my team names last year, because I drafted Deshaun Watson, just as a deep sleeper. You're like, who knows? Maybe he'll beat the suspension case. Well, we'll see what happens now. But my team name was Deshaun's Massage Parlor. That was my team name, one from one of my leagues. So, like I said, it kind of just depends on who's on my team. But for now, I kind of switch it up every year for the other leagues that I'm in. But for our main league that Ari and I'm in, we it's not like we can't, we just don't, because it's kind of like a franchise. We treat it like it's a real NFL team. But obviously, I went through a rebrand. So if you go through a complete we had a bunch of rebrands after the 2020 season. So that was kind of like the biggest name change thing. But we don't really change our names. Ari, do you?
Yeah, like you said, in our main league, it's a keeper league that we've been going on 10 years roughly, like something like that. And so so for the most part, teams in our league, in our main league, kind of keep our team names that we've had. Not that we can't change, just kind of tradition in our home league that we've been in. But yeah, on other kind of redraft leagues I'm in, I do kind of tend to try to find a funny name for a player, like you said, that's on my team. So yeah, I would say it changes yearly, and like the kind of redraft leagues that we're in kind of every year. But in the home league, the main league that we're in, it kind of changes for the most part. Like some teams that have kind of been towards the bottom of the league and want to rebrand will rebrand. But for the most part, we've kind of, like, some teams have had their same team name since like 2012, 2013. Some have kind of changed, once in that time between 2012 and now. Some kind of go, now that we're all most of us graduated college, but in college, some of us would have kind of our college's mascot as our team name. But yeah, I would say just kind of the short answer to this question would be kind of yearly based off the players that we have on our team.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Our fantasy football league is a traditionalist league. Let's just leave it at that. Moving on to the next question. This comes in from @Kevin_Alexander24. This is a pretty interesting question. Just in general, he says pick two out of the 3 wide receivers listed on your screen for next season. He chose DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, and Marquise Brown. Ari, I'm gonna let you go first on this one. Out of those 3, which 2 do you like?
Yeah, I know a lot of people are in on Marquise Brown this year, reuniting with Kyler Murray. They played together in college at Oklahoma. But I'm personally going Metcalf and Moore here. I'd personally Marquise Brown, he's a deep threat. He'll make explosive plays, and I think he will be better in Arizona than Baltimore. I think Arizona, will throw the ball more in Arizona than they did in Baltimore. But I think Moore and Metcalf are a little bit safer. We're going to see more targets. Obviously, you have the bigger question marks at quarterback on those teams in Seattle and Carolina. But I mean, DJ Moore's had those quarterback question marks for several years now, and he's still been a consistent, 1,100 yard, 80 to 90 kind of catch type of guy. And so you're going to get out of him. And then with Metcalf, it was a small sample size. I think at 5 games, but he was a wide receiver 1 with Geno Smith last year. I think whether it's Geno Smith or, or Drew Lock, he's still going to see the targets. He's still going to be the number 1. I think Tyler Lockett takes a bigger hit of the two, just given his report. Russell Wilson, I think that's going to be the biggest loss with Lockett with the quarterback change. But Metcalf, he has the frame to where he can be quarterback proof. You just throw the ball up to him, and he's going to come down with it quite often. And so I'm going Metcalf and Moore here.
I 100% agree with you. I was going to go with Metcalf and Moore as well. I want to believe in Marquise Brown, but it's just he's so limited in terms of production right now because obviously DeAndre Hopkins is coming back after week 6, and then after that it's going to be the Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins show with Marquise Brown. And I feel like his receiving yards are going to be kind of limited. Obviously, about the first weeks is going to be a lot more fun for those two. Obviously, you mentioned the reuniting of Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown, both going to Oklahoma. But I feel like now, it's kind of like, yeah, you mentioned the quarterback situations for both Carolina and Seattle. But when you have DK Metcalf, big body, he definitely can be a wide receiver 1 for pretty much any quarterback. And not late breaking news, but just interesting note, Seattle is no longer interested in the Baker Mayfield trade. So we can finally rule that nonsense out the damn window and kind of focus now on kind of Geno Smith or Drew Lock kind of leading the charge for the Seattle team. So we kind of know the quarterback situation a little more in Seattle. And I feel like, both quarterbacks have the ability to throw to DK Metcalf. And you mentioned Tyler Lockett's can be the one taking a harder hit from this, obviously, just because, his connection with Russell Wilson was kind of just ridiculously amazing. Russell Wilson just threw it down anywhere, and Tyler Lockett would somehow make a great catch. So I definitely agree with you there. And then DJ Moore, obviously, yes, his situation in Carolina is a little more interesting just because, Carolina has a different quarterback every week. But I feel like just because in comparison to Marquise Brown, I feel like he has a lot more, potential to be, a better wide receiver 1 or just a better wide receiver this year than Marquise Brown. So I definitely agree with you there on both receivers as well. And then getting into our next question here, this is from @RyanCox10. He basically has who are some potential players in the first 2 rounds of this year's draft who have pretty much any bust potential. Ari, what do you think? Who has bust potential from this year's draft?
Yeah, I mean, obviously every year there are players who bust in the first couple of rounds. You just kind of have to decipher through the players that kind of carry maybe the most risk for different reasons. The one that stands out to the most to me, I know many will disagree with this, and that's fine. But the one first-round pick that brings the most worry to me is Derrick Henry. I know I mentioned Christian McCaffrey and the injuries, but you have Derrick Henry coming off a bigger foot injury. He's had so much tread under his tires, even dating back to college days. And then it's a combination of the injury coming off of, and I also think the Tennessee offense is going to be a lot worse this year, losing A.J. Brown. I don't think he's going to see the same opportunities for touchdowns in this new Tennessee offense. So you mix that with, the injury and the offense he's in. I don't like to go off of stacked boxes because I don't think that's like as big of a deal as some believe. But I mean, with Robert Woods leading the way, in Tennessee, and Treylon Burks, I think that he's going to see a lot more stacked boxes and just a lot more intention in general. And then you also have the lack of receiving upside. He doesn't have a huge role in the passing game. He never really has. And so this is for PPR. So you kind of put all those factors together, and Derrick Henry is my biggest kind of worry in the first round. I also wrote down Alvin Kamara if he faces a big suspension. There's some who think he could be suspended 6 games, and he's kind of going in the second round right now in kind of mock drafts, and so you have that risk potentially. And then I'm a believer in this guy, but I'm not going to ignore the risk in Javonte Williams. If it's still a 50-50 split between him and Melvin Gordon, which I don't think it will be, then maybe Javonte still going around 2 is a potential bust opportunity. I think it's going to be at least a 60-40 split in favor of Javonte, so I don't have those worries myself, but I understand the worry that some people have, with Javonte this year.
Yeah, those are definitely 2 players I've circled as well. I was also going to mention Alvin Kamara. You mentioned his pending suspension. You really don't know what's going to happen there. And you mentioned he's going in second rounds right now, so that could actually be a huge bust. I know you're huge on this next guy for this year, but I just can't believe in him in that offense. I feel like Saquon Barkley can once again have a dud season. I just feel like that offense is not yet ready for him to have that explosiveness. This is the last year potentially of Daniel Jones at the quarterback position. And, his offensive abilities are very, very minimal for that offense. And so I feel like it could be another year. And this is no discredit to Brian Dable, obviously first year, but, that offense has a lot of problems. And it does not just start with, the fact that they were missing Saquon Barkley for the year. That offensive line is still not up to par. It's getting better. They got Evan Neal this year, but I don't think it's going to be revolutionary better this year compared to last year. There's still some big holes missing there. And I feel like, yes, even though there's a lot of high expectations for Saquon, as you said, or pretty much have you been saying for this coming season, I feel like, he could definitely be underwhelming this year just because of how the offense around him is still not the best. And the fact that, you don't really know what's going on with that wide receiver core. It's pretty much 3 guys kind of battling for that number 1 position. Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard still, and then Kadarius Toney because, they still have those 3. So I feel like Saquon could definitely be affected in this, with his production and causing that a lot of teams may just stack the box because obviously Saquon is going to be their pretty much bigger star, and they know Daniel Jones can't drop back and throw deep at all. So I feel like definitely Saquon is a risk, but I don't think it's a huge risk, but I definitely see some potential bust, some bust potential in Saquon Barkley this coming season for his fantasy production. And we're going to get into our next question, another one by X King Raven X. Thanks, X King Raven X, for all these questions. He asked favorite rookie wide receiver from a strict fantasy football perspective this year. I'll go first this time. I basically have 3. My 3 are just Garrett Wilson. I feel like, I think that's kind of like, actually, no, I have 4, excuse me. I feel like Garrett Wilson could potentially be one, depending on how that offense in New York kind of flourishes. But if Zach Wilson can throw the ball, and if, what we've seen out of Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State, I feel like that could be a talent. So I feel like Garrett Wilson's up there. I like Chris Olave down in New Orleans. I feel like he's definitely going to be up there just because, the whole Michael Thomas situation. We don't know his health yet. And then obviously you mentioned Kamara. He could be suspended for the first 6 games of the season. I feel like it kind of leaves the door open for Olave to flourish as kind of not a wide receiver, but, as a top rookie receiver in this draft class, just from a fantasy perspective as well, putting up some big numbers from weeks. And obviously they're bringing back Jameis Winston, he can definitely throw the ball. So they have a more established quarterback. Another receiver I like is Drake London, just from the fact that he is the only guy on that offense other than Kyle Pitts who can really, make a big name for himself. Obviously Marcus Mariota is kind of the in-between year quarterback. What that means for me is, the transition quarterback trying to save to get one next year. And, obviously Kyle Pitts is going to be that dude. I feel like Kyle Pitts is going to have a great year, but I feel like in compliment when Kyle Pitts is, covered or something like that, I feel like that gives the door for Drake London, kind of be the reason why he was the first wide receiver taken off the board in the 2022 NFL draft. So I feel like Drake London can definitely be up there. And then my final one, Christian Watson going to Green Bay. I feel like obviously really opens the door because they don't really have an established wide receiver one right now. And, obviously after Devontae Adams got traded, Aaron Rodgers is still there. So it's kind of up to Alvin Lazard or, Sammy Watkins or someone to really step up. And I feel like Christian Watson, rookie year, wants to prove something. I feel like he could definitely have a big year from a fantasy football perspective as kind of being the youngest receiver and kind of maybe being the elite receiver that the Green Bay Packers are looking for, the Devontae Adams replacement.
If you had to pick one, who are you going?
If I had to pick one safely, I would be going with Chris Olave. I just feel like Michael Thomas, I don't know what his status is. And then on top of that, you have the Alvin Kamara pending suspension. And I feel like those two combined, that really opens the door for Chris Olave to really produce in New Orleans, especially since New Orleans, more of a passing offense, and now a new regime in there, whole new system. I feel like this could be just a really good opportunity for Chris Olave to just kind of be a sneaky receiver for fantasy this year.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to go Drake London, and it all comes down to just immediate opportunity, like you said. In that offense, they're going to be playing from behind pretty much every week probably. And then it's really just Pitts and London in terms of like wide receiver and tight end for the most part, in the offense. And I think, the quarterback concerns are there with Mariota, Desmond Ridder potentially later in the season. But I think London kind of has the frame at 6'4", like I said, talking about with Metcalf, to where he can kind of be a safety blanket. You just kind of throw it his way and he's going to come down with it more times than not. So London is my guy, but my dark horse I'm going to talk about is Treylon Burks. I think it's going to be a slow start for him this year, but I think if Malik Willis gets under center, I think Malik Willis' arm strength and then Burks' ability downfield can be a really special connection. I like them a lot long-term in Dynasty, and then potentially late this year, like the second half of the season, if they're struggling and they put in Malik Willis for 10, let's say, like halfway through the season, and then at that point, Burks would be fully kind of up to speed, with the Titans offense. So I think Burks, I don't have much expectations early in the season, but just kind of a dark horse kind of the second half of the year, mostly if Willis under center, but I mean, potentially if Tannehill is too. I like Burks a lot. I think I like his talent upside. I think he's a little bit raw, and so I think that's kind of why it's going to be a slow start for him. But I think once he gets going, he's going to really get going.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I like Treylon Burks as well. I almost kind of mentioned him as well, but I just feel like that Tennessee offense is going to be a lot different. But I feel like Burks could definitely be an emerging star. They hopefully try to see him as the A.J. Brown replacement. It's going to take a little while, but you mentioned if they bring in Malik Willis, that could definitely be a great 1-2 connection right there out of Tennessee. Would love to see that. We're going to get into our last question. This came in from Gabriel Guire1 on Instagram. This is our last question of the day. We're going to be doing these a lot more in the future, so feel free to send more questions.
We had two in the chat that we can go over after this, but yeah, this is the last one from the question box from this morning.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, keep sending those questions. We're going to be doing some more mailbag episodes in the future, but a few more questions as we end the episode. This is coming in from Gabriel Guire1. He's asking, just pretty much from a fantasy footballer's perspective, would you recommend going zero running back strategy this year? Basically, not really targeting any running backs and kind of strictly going toward wide receiver. Ari, I'm going to let you answer this one first, since you are the fantasy.football expert. Would you recommend not going toward running backs this year and just going toward wide receivers? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never one to recommend like a strategy, before your draft. I'm always kind of play the board, best player available kind of guy, but kind of drafter. I think in a draft that's super running back heavy, where let's say you're the 12th pick and let's say like 10 of the first 11 picks are running backs. I think that's a spot where you could go zero running back if just kind of wide receivers are kind of falling to you. But I'm never one to kind of force a strategy like this. I'm always one who's going to play the board, kind of go best player available. In the fantasy football throne league last year, I think that was how it played out. We had the 12th pick. I want to say 10 of the first 11 picks are running backs. And then we took Adams and Diggs at that 12-13 turn. And we kind of struggled at running back, but we kind of played the waiver wire all year. We found some pieces that kind of fit in the puzzle, so to speak. And we ended up winning the league just by going wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. So it can definitely work out in the draft, or it kind of plays out that way where it goes super running back heavy in the first couple of rounds. I kind of wrote down some running backs. If you were to kind of, there's your running back, and then there's hero running back, which is kind of taking one running back early and then kind of waiting for your RB2 until later. And so if you go either of those routes, a few running backs I kind of like in the middle of rounds, and I put a post on this like a few days ago, I want to say. Kareem Hunt, Kenneth Walker, Melvin Gordon, Tony Pollard are kind of a handful of running backs that I kind of like in the middle of round 2. You could draft, as your RB2, RB3, and it might not feel great, right away, relying on them as your RB2 early on, but it can definitely play out that way as the season goes on. So yeah, like kind of the long answer, kind of the short answer to this question is it can work out. I wouldn't force it, but if your draft works out a certain way, I definitely think it can work out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think it's more of a draft by draft basis. You mentioned like last year for your draft, pretty much every first pick in the first round was strictly running back, and so you kind of have to adjust on the fly. Like, okay, your pick's coming up. Do you want to risk taking like a running back that you kind of don't want to take, or do you want to take wide receiver who's established? So I feel like it's draft by draft dependent, and also kind of league by league dependent as well. I mean, you don't really know we don't really know what your league is looking like in terms of, is it a flex? Is it a super flex, dynasty, whatever? Kind of depending on what your league is looking like, also depends on what your draft strategy is going into this year. So I'm not going to, as I already said, I'm not going to recommend it. But if something happens in your draft where, like for example, like Ari, where you're at the 12 pick and you have Adams and Diggs right there available, you might take those two, have the best wide receiver 1-2 combo in the league, and then obviously struggle with running backs, maybe struggle with running backs later in later rounds. But, with that, it's all about hidden gems and, finding out what works for you and stuff like that. So I'm not going to recommend it, but it's kind of just something that's on the fly in your draft. And depending on what your draft, what your league is looking like as well, depending on if it's more running back dependent or if it's potentially one where you can not really focus on running backs maybe about the first couple rounds. And we're going to get into another question. This came in the chat earlier on our podcast. This is a simple question. Do we believe in Breece Hall and Travis Etienne? Obviously, Breece Hall, first year going to the Jets, Travis Etienne, after his knee injury last offseason, coming back for his first full season, reuniting with his college quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. Ari, do you believe in both of them or one of them or neither of them? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Travis Etienne I like a lot this year. I think especially with James Robinson, there's some reports that he's ahead of schedule, whatever you want to call it. But coming off torn Achilles kind of later in the season last year, I don't really see him returning anytime soon. And so Etienne should be the workhorse. And so when you factor in, the run game with this connection with Trevor Lawrence kind of in the passing game, Etienne, I'm a huge believer in this year. He's reported looks fully healthy, kind of in camp so far. And so I'm super excited about him. Breece Hall, I like Hall this year, but I don't love him. I like him. I don't love him. I think he's going to be the early down workhorse in the Jets backfield. I think they drafted him to be that. But I also don't see Michael Carter kind of going away like completely. I still think Carter's going to have a role, especially in the passing game. And so I think Hall is certainly capable as a pass catcher, but I see him kind of taking over that role immediately. And so between the two, I like Etienne more in PPR because I see a lot more upside in the passing game from Etienne. I still think Hall is going to be a pretty safe RB2. I still think he's going to be kind of the workhorse on the early downs, but I think Carter's still going to kind of mix in, especially early in the season.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I feel like I'm not going to say I'm not a believer in Breece Hall, but I would say I'm more of a believer in Travis Etienne. He's going to have his first full season. He's reuniting with his college quarterback, as I mentioned earlier before. He has that upside that he can, be that multi-use back that, that hopefully Jacksonville is kind of using him for. And also, you mentioned James Robinson. They're saying, yeah, he's predicted to come back early, but torn Achilles, that's not an easy injury to come back from, especially as a running back, using your legs to juke and all that. So I feel like that could potentially be something. If he comes back, he may get injured quickly again, and that really opens the door for Travis Etienne. So I feel like he has a lot more upside. And you mentioned Michael Carter still being in that backfield for the Jets, and that kind of limits Breece Hall's ability. But I still think Breece Hall is going to be the lead back. But I mean, you mentioned you have Michael Carter. You have the Jets backfield still has some key names in there from last season that they're retaining for this season. So that could definitely be interesting as well for Breece Hall. So I'm not going to say I'm not a believer in Breece Hall, but there's just a lot more upside, as you mentioned, in Travis Etienne this coming season, coming off a full recovery for a knee surgery, and then kind of now coming back, going through OTAs, going through his first process running camp, training camp, and all that stuff. And now he finally gets his full season, first full season in the NFL. So I definitely would say that Travis Etienne has a lot more upside as well. And we're going to get into our final question here. This is something that came into the chat as well. Basically, who do you like more in dynasty leagues? Do you like Tyler Lockett or Rondale Moore? Ari, do you have a preference in either one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely more debatable this year in Dynasty, just given the Seahawks quarterback situation and then with Hopkins suspension. But in Dynasty, I'm still going Tyler Lockett. I mean, this is a Seahawks team that, 1 year from now, while the quarterback situation looks, pretty bleak right now, I think, they're looking at a 2023 class. So 1 year from now, the quarterback could feel a lot safer in Seattle, I think, 1 year from now. And then with Rondale Moore, you still have a pretty crowded offense in Arizona. And I do expect Moore to take a step forward this year after he wasn't super involved last year as a rookie. But I'm still going Lockett from a dynasty's perspective. I think the Seahawks figure the quarterback situation out either this year, next year, pretty soon.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. There's a lot of potential for Rondale Moore, obviously, in that offense. But you mentioned it is a little crowded. They still have James Conner out the backfield, who they, I think, expect to use as a multi-use back until DeAndre Hopkins come back. They just traded for Marquise Brown. They still have
Zach Ertz.
They still have Zach Ertz, who they traded for last season. They have a bunch of names in the offense, and it is a little crowded. But when you mentioned Tyler Lockett, yes, it's going to be a struggle this year, but next year, just imagine a different QB throwing him the ball. I'm not going to say hopefully. I'm going to say hopefully better quarterback throwing him the ball as well. But it's not going to be hopefully Drew Lock or Geno Smith, and he definitely still has that ability to be a elite receiver in this league. Just it's going to be a down year for him this year. So in terms of dynasty, I definitely would lean toward Tyler Lockett for now, but we have to see what production Rondale Moore can potentially do this year. But I'm not going to say Rondale Moore is not going to be used a lot, because I actually see him being personally, I see him as a dynasty favorite. But in terms of just immediate dynasty, I just say Tyler Lockett, just because of that transfer of quarterbacks next year is going to be a lot more different, and it's going to be having a lot more upside for Tyler Lockett, and not as crowded of an offense as the Arizona Cardinals is. And but you never know. We may see D-Hop maybe leave that Arizona organization. You never know. Anything could happen. It's the NFL. So but we take it with a grain of salt, but you never know. Ari, I think that's going to wrap up anything. If you had anything else you wanted to say.
No, yeah, like you said, I think tomorrow we'll go over the NBA free agency and all those moves that could still be made in that. But thank you, everyone, for sending in your questions. Hopefully we can do this type of episode maybe once a week, once every other week, something like that. So I'll keep on Fantasy Football Expert on Instagram. I'll keep putting in the question box when we're going to do these. And as always, we'll get to as many as we can.
All right, so this has been an episode of AKP Sports Talk. As I already mentioned, tune in tomorrow. It's going to be an NBA free agency special. We'll go over some of the big names that have been signed or traded this past weekend. And obviously, if anything else happens in free agency, we'll keep you updated. We'll just peep out. We're going to be doing a lot more of these mailbags, so peep that as well. But this has been an episode of AKP Sports Talk. That's Ari. I'm Korea. We will see you guys tomorrow.